Moin moin, welcome. We have Monday, 6 o'clock Central European Time. My name is Lars von Thienen and welcome to a new episode of Cycles TV here at the Foundation for the Study of Cycles. Once a week we meet here to discuss cycles, to showcase cycles with the tools and features we provide from the Foundation for you to try it on your own. So today I want to talk about first a little bit the dynamic nature of cycles and why this is important if we look at our cycle analyzer and our cycle analyzer app, which you all can use. So therefore it's important you know about how this works. And the second topics I will show you a little bit some features on how to use it. So as always, please join me in the chat section so then you can drop in your questions. I try to review your topics live while we are here. So last week we had some issues with the YouTube chat, but I hope today it will work a little bit better. So please feel free to drop in your comments and I will have an eye on it while we are here and talking. Okay, so dynamic cycles. What and why are dynamic cycles important? So what you see here behind me, this is exactly the nature of dynamic cycles. You see two cycles. One is a gray one, which is a kind of static cycle. I hope you can see the gray one here just behind. So it's static, it does not move. And we have the red cycle, which is a little bit dynamic. So it's a little bit moving around or varying around the length, the phase, not amplitude here in this case, but let's start to use with length and phase settings here. So the important topic here on this cycle is that you will see that the black line here in the center, this is where we are today, and the left-hand section, this is the past, so the history where all the digital signal processing takes place. And on the right-hand side of this vertical line here, you see the future, so the projection area, so where we do our projection of the cycle into the future. And this is the most important part if we do this on kind of market data. So as we are always interested in doing this kind of forecasting. And please observe now 2 points on this topic here. So this is the first gray top here where the red cycle is moving from left to right, or the variation is okay, to say this is where the detection, the analysis takes place of whatever algorithm you use. So this is the digital signal processing here in this area. And at the same time, you see here on the right-hand side, let's observe this top here, in this case, you see the gray one and the deviation to the red one. You see the more you go into the future, the more the variation or the deviation gets higher compared to the static cycle you see here. So it's kind of the error is adding up the more you move into the future. And that's important to understand so that you always, it might look like a good match here in the past where the analysis is done and where the digital signal processing is using the analysis and then plotting the cycle into the future. But in the real world, the cycle will not stay static. The cycle will kind of vary around a little bit the length and the phase, which then results in this red cycle here in the real world. So we do a static projection, the gray one, but in reality, the cycle will vary around the parameter. So this is why we see the red one, which is then happening in reality, because it's not static, it's not fixed if we go into the future. It will vary. And the error, we had here in the cycle detection, and even you see the deviation here from the red one to the gray one. It's very small. Yeah, so you would judge it as a valid cycle just looking at the in sample period. But this variation then moving into the future might differ from the real cycle a lot here. So, but it's just a kind of animation here to show you that in the real world we have the red cycle, yeah, which is varying in length and phase, and you always need to be careful with gray static cycle projections, and you always need to keep this in mind because once we move over to our cycle analyzer, what we do are static cycle projections, and that's the kind of ideal world where the reality is a little bit morphing around these parameters. And how we can deal with it, I mean, that's now the important question we all have. How we can deal with it, that's what I want to discuss with you today. So enough theory. Let's go into the practice here and move into our cycle analyzer. So what we will, I just need to disable the animation. So that's just a simple animation. So let's move over to our application we use here all together when doing cycle analysis. And please drop a note in the chat section that I can just monitor that audio, video, and all what you see here is okay. And in order to know that the chat element is working here. So feel free, just drop a note that you are here and live and listening at least. Okay, let's, for example, what are we doing today? So during the last week's sessions, I explained more from the weekly perspective on the financial stress index. I think it was some weeks ago. And I think 2 weeks ago, I showcased the National Association of Active Investment Managers Exposure Index, also a weekly sentiment cycle. And we matched this with the current market behavior. Thanks for your comments. So now I see that I'm live and kicking. So that's good to know. And I think we matched it to the markets, to the main markets, but what we did not do, and this was a question out of the community, the VIX index, which is also a daily sentiment measure, was not in alignment with the other cycles we've seen at this point in time. So, and I owe you an answer, or I owe you an analysis on the VIX index as a kind of sentiment measure. And that's what I want to do here, or that's why I select the volatility index for today's session here, because we've not looked at this data during the last weeks. So let's go to our sentiment dashboard here. Let's select the volatility index here. Let's open the data set here. That's the volatility index, and let's see what cycles we have here in this case. So there's this longer one, 177. This is also a cycle we saw, at least in the last year, very often. I've explained a lot about this cycle, so we can use it for sure. And then let's also look for shorter cycles. So let's add a shorter cycle here. Let's just go. I will use the 40, or let's even use the 32 cycle here. So this is just using 2 cycles, long-term cycles, so 170 something. This is how I like to start, to pick one cycle which stands out from a longer perspective. That's why I always have an eye on the spectrum chart to really spot the key cycles which stand out, which is in this case this one, and then a shorter term cycle where you could think about picking one of the top 2 cycles here, so 32 or 40. I will talk about the difference here in a second, but that's how it looks like. And I think it was mentioned by you or by some colleagues out of the community here, so that if you look at these cycles here, so that from the volatility index, we appear to, or we could expect a cyclic bottom. From a shorter term perspective, the next one is happening next week, or at least combining it with the longer term cycle here, mid of March. I mean, I would not look at the exact day anyhow, but mid of March. Let's say here, second half of February until mid-March, if you combine these two. That's from the volatility index, or from the sentiment perspective here. You always know, so that a low in the volatility sentiment index refers to market high. Yeah, so this is how we read it. And that's now what you need to add to the market analysis. So that's one thing we always do here in this session. So the longer term cycles, yeah, exposure index, financial stress index, indicate that the turnaround is around the corner from the sentiment weekly cycles. But from the volatility index, which is also an important measure, it might look like that at least during the next 4 weeks. But the takeaway is that during the next 4 weeks, all these cycles come into alignment. Yeah? And that's always another important topic we try to bring across, that you need to look out for cycle alignments. So if you use the cycle analyzer here, which we use, you do your work on the exposure index, the financial stress index, weekly cycles, they indicate a turnaround. And now the daily cycles, it's the next lower level of analysis, where the daily now is on the S&P, we see the cycle with a length of 120 something. And now the volatility index joins the cyclic alignment in the second half of February, at least until mid of March. So that's how cycles within cycles work. So I think we are at a very important situation from a timing perspective in the markets, just looking at the main markings and the volatility index. So that's the topic, actual market situation. But the thing to look about is the dynamic nature of cycles, which I've introduced, and how the cycle analyzer can help us in this sense. Okay, so okay, I just cross-check your questions, so don't get me wrong. I will always have a look here. So the dynamic topic on cycles, and therefore we also have this dominant cycle here in the lower section of our analyzer. You might have asked yourself, hey, what's that about here? The dominant cycle down below. I can scroll it even more up here. You see this little box here in the analyzer, which is called dominant cycle. And often we receive the question, why is the number here showing up at the dominant cycle box different to the numbers we found here from the spectrum chart in this list here? What's the difference? And there's a lot of irritation around that, and therefore it has to do with the dynamic nature of cycles, yeah, what I showcased with the animation in the beginning. So I try to explain you a little bit around that. So first of all, if you see a mismatch between the list of cycles here in the upper right and the dominant cycles, there's a reason for that. And the reason can be found in the configuration in the settings. So if we open our settings panels and go to the Explorer settings, so the Cycle Explorer is what is used for the dominant cycle detection in the box below. Might be not self-explaining, but the Cycle Explorer is used to capture the dominant cycle, which is shown in the box here. Oops, down below, this one here. So with this configuration here, you can change the behavior. And the key topic now, talking about dynamic nature of cycles, can be found here if you have the two options here for the method to choose. You can switch between dynamic in-sample and full in-sample range. And this means if we switch this to full in-sample range, the method will be exactly the same you use in the cycle scanner. So the cycle scanner is used for the full spectrum analysis of the full data you have selected. And if you want to use the same full amount of data, yeah, the cycle scanner has used, and you have picked this on your chart, then switch the method to full in-sample range. And this will give you the exact same number. So if you see a deviation between the dominant cycle is not shown here in this list, that's the reason why that is the cause. And now I will explain you what's the difference. So you've seen now I've exactly chosen the same period here. So I will deactivate the composite cycle for a second. And now you see the detected dominant cycle here in the box also changed, yeah, to the length of 32. You remember before that it was around 40, so now it's switched to 32. Because the procedure is, first, if we switch to all data is used, it means that all what is shown here as in sample, so everything you have selected for cycle analysis in this range here, will now also be used for the dominant cycle detection. And often you will have the situation that here in the upper chart you maybe analyze 5 years, 10 years, 15 years of data, yeah, so that you have a very large period where you want to do your cycle analysis, your spectrum, detect the key cycles which are in this data set. It's a very long spectrum. So you do your analysis on a large amount of data going into the past. And now remember the animation I showed in the beginning of this session. The more data you use in the past, the cycles which will be detected will be matched to the length of the data set you used for the analysis, right? So the cycles have a great fit, yeah, in regards to their phase, yeah, and their length. So this is the length, and the phase is where the lows and bottoms are aligned. It's a kind of average cycle fit for the data you have analyzed, because this is what digital signal processing is doing. So, but as cycles vary over time, if the average cycle length of the past 10 years might be 70 days or whatever, maybe during the last 2 years, the cycle length switched to 75. But if you analyze 10 years, you will find the average length of 70 days. And if you project this into the future, yeah, then the average length of 70 days will be used for the projection, while during the last 2 years of these 10 years, maybe the period has anyhow switched to 75. But in this case, your projection will differ because you use the average cycle length of the 10 years period you have used for your analysis, instead of just analyzing the last 2 years where the cycle length is 75. You get it? So therefore, to detect if a cycle was there during the last 10 years, it's very good to use a very large time frame. But if it comes to projection into the future, the average cycle parameters of a long past will not help you to make a good projection into the future. Because to make a projection into your future, you need the current cycle length at the actual point in time and not 8 years ago. And even the average cycle length over the last 10 years might be a good average looking at the past, but might lead to errors on your projection time frame. And I've shown you in the animation how the error adds up the more and more you go into the future. So if we are interested in doing projections, and that's mainly the case if we analyze market data and want to get a timing clue have into the future, we need to focus on the current past and not the most available past. And that's different. Okay, that's a short explanation, but I hope I made a point here. So, and that's exactly what the dominant cycle is doing when you switch to dynamic in-sample range. So this allows you, the dynamic in-sample range means that the Cycle Explorer will just use the current past to detect the cycle, not 10 or 20 years. Yeah. So this will help us to get the right length and the right phase of the cycle, which is more accurate to current behavior instead of averaging over the whole data set. So, and that's also the reason why the setting differs. So the standard cycle scanner uses the full period, while the dominant cycle just analyzes the current past. And that's why you might see different numbers, so that the cycle for the average cycle length over the whole period might be 50, yeah, but you won't find 50 as dominant cycle. The dominant cycle might show up as 46 or 52. And you might ask yourself, why is the dominant cycle 52? But in my cycle scanner, there is no cycle with a length of 52. And that's the reason, yeah, because in the current pass, the cycle has now a length of 52, while in the average period of your analysis, the cycle might have an average length of 50. Yeah, so that's a difference. So, but you can set it to the same procedure. If you use full in-sample range, then you will have exactly the same match. But I recommend always use dynamic in-sample, because now you can compare it. Yeah, so even though you might have 10 years of data for average cycles in this data set, which will you see on this list, then you will see in the dynamic cycle which is the current cycle just in the current past. And if there is a kind of match, or if they are similar, so you know from both perspective, the long-term perspective and the short-term current perspective, which cycles are there. And to show the dominant cycle as standalone cycle on the chart, you can activate the dominant cycle plot here by clicking this button here. Yeah, and this will just plot this cycle here as standalone kind of indicator on the chart. And then you can add up your composite cycle analysis on top of that. So, so this shows us now the dominant cycle with a length of 40. So, okay, I hope you got it, the difference between longer term analysis and short term analysis. And for projection, the short term analysis is more important than the long term analysis. So, next important point to understand, because this is also, if you have a close-up look here on this, how this is plotted on the chart, you see the cycle projection, which is the red one here, which is just a simple plot of the 40 days cycle here, with a projection into the future here. Yeah, that's more or less self-explaining. And then you see the light blue line here, which is also shown in this indicator. And maybe you've asked yourself, what's about this dotted blue line here? This is the method, it's derived from the Hurst analysis. It's a so-called cycle highlighter. And the cycle highlighter was developed by Brian Millard in this book, Channels and Cycles, a tribute to J.M. Hurst. So he just revealed or just have gone over the concept of Hurst of the cycles, and has talked about this channel concept. He is using these decentered or centered moving averages, and how he's doing that. And he has developed the cycle highlighter. So the cycle highlighter is just what Millard introduced in this book. And we can bring this now on the chart by using the dominant cycle, which is shown here. And what it means is that it shows you the difference between the price behavior. So the blue cycle here, or the blue line here in this chart, is the filtered price behavior. So the cycle which is in the real price data, while the red cycle is the theoretical cycle based on the dominant cycle of 40 days. So, and if you see a match of the real price behavior, which is the blue line here, and the theoretical detected cycle, then you see that the price was really, or there was a cycle in the price data, which is according to the even to the theoretical cycle. And you can see the phase shifts of these cycles. So if you, for example, in this case, you go back into September of last year, you see that there's a deviation between the blue one and the red one. And here you see now the red one is a static cycle plotted into the past. Yeah, but I always told you that this dynamic behavior, which was shown in the introduction video. And here you see that there was a phase shift between the real price behavior, yeah, and the red line here. So you see that the cycle is still there in the data. So the blue line is the cyclic price behavior with a length of 40 days. It would, by the way, it would be a flat line if there is no cyclic behavior in the price with a length of 40 days, the blue line would be just a flat line. Yeah, but as we see that the real cyclic behavior has more or less the same length as the or is visible exactly at this point, but is shifted here a little bit to the right. This means the cycle was there, so there was a cycle with a length of 40 days, but the phase has shifted here in this period. And then you see when this cycle now gets out of sync. It gets out of sync if you see, at least from a static perspective, here in May last year. There you see it was a higher phase shift. And if you see a flat line, yeah, let's just go into the past. So here in February 2019, you see this area here. So there the price is just a flat line. So there was no cycle with a length of 40 days in the price series, while the static cycle plotted into the past indicates there was a cycle, but it was not. So the cycle highlighter compared to the detected cycle and plotted as a sine wave allows you to identify if the cycle with a length of 40 days and this static cycle was there in the price data or not. So you see here, while the period at end of 2018, yeah, this cycle was very active and aligned in the static behavior, while then in the beginning of 2019, the cycle was not there in the market. Yeah, so the combination of cycle highlighter and dominant cycle just plotted as one cycle on the chart allows you to analyze in the past when the cycle disappeared, when there was a phase shift in the cycle, and at which point in time there was a good match between the price cycle and a theoretical cycle here. So in the end of 2019, the cycle was highly in sync with the cycle, and from the amplitude was also there, as we see the amplitude here in the theoretical cycle. So this is a kind of research if you want to study the cycle, also how this behaved in the past. Oh, sorry, where's my price data? We are working on the volatility index still here, but this applies to any data set anyhow. So I've just crushed the price axis. I think I need to refresh the chart here for a second. So that's the dominant cycle, and that explains the difference here. And that's also why the blue line here ends somewhere in the past, because it's a displaced central moving average where we don't have any data here. So what you're looking for is you need to have a good fit, at least 2 to 3 tops here between the dominant cycle and the price behavior. This is also a cross check, yeah, that you can set this cycle as valid if you have a good alignment, at least within the last 3 cycle turns. And that's the difference. The dominant cycle is just looking at the last 2, 3, 4 cycles of this behavior, while the overall period is looking in a longer period. And if you see both, so the cycle with the length of 40 is there in the overall data set, and it has been detected as dominant cycle, this is then a second step to validate these two cycles that they are here. Okay, that's the dominant cycle. Now the question is, hey, what can I do with this kind of information? And now different methods of using cycle analysis on the chart comes into play. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard about Hurst and Hurst analysis and the nominal model of Hurst for different cycle length. So while in the cycle scanner and the spectrum, we mostly look for the most active ones, regardless of nominal cycle models or something like that. The box here on the dominant cycle model allows you also to define a range. And this range now becomes interesting if you want to combine the digital signal processing with the ability of detecting cycles in price series with the current phase and the current length, and then you cross-check it with the overall data, and models like Hurst in regards to the nominal cycle model. And let's bring back this topic here. So therefore, yeah, this is just one example. If you follow the Hurst nominal model, I mean, Hurst has detected, I think, 11. So mainly markets are driven by 11 cycles, and he named these cycles, which are shown here. I've just put some on the chart. The total list consists of 11 cycles here, but I've just listed the ones here below: the 20-day nominal cycle, the 40-day nominal cycle, the 80-day nominal cycle, the 20-week nominal cycle. But these are average cycle lengths. Yeah, it does not mean that there is always an 80-day cycle. That's the average cycle length, which is shown here on the left. Yeah, so the 80-day cycle has an average length of 86.2 days, blah blah blah. So and you know, from the dynamic nature of cycles, there will never be a fixed cycle of 80 days or 68.2 days on the chart. And if you, because the cycle is dynamic, it might be 70 days, it might be 62 days, it might be, I don't know, 89 days. And it's always then the nominal cycle of 80, named 80-day cycle with an average length of 68. So now, the dominant cycle explorer is able, if we give it a range. So therefore, on the right-hand side, I've just showcased the range you could specify. So if you want to detect the current active cycle in regards to length and phase, so where we are in the cycle, why not just give the cycle detection algorithm a range so that the minimum range is 50, the maximum range is 80, and we want to get the most dominant cycle in the range of 50 to 80 days, which is currently active in the market. And then we could say this is the nominal cycle of 80 days, which would get into the Hurst method then afterwards. So let me try to show you how to do this with a cycle analyzer you have. So if we want to detect the cycle with the length of the 80-day cycle, the nominal Hurst cycle of 80 days, the lower range would be 50, the higher range would be 80. So you preset this, and then you set DC update. So this will give you, just update this, this box here. So this will not impact the overall cycle scanner and analysis. It will now just pick you the most active cycle in the range of 50 to 80 days on this chart, give you the actual length, the status of the phase, and some projections. So the next low, the next top, the profitability if you would have traded the cycle on the chart. So it gives you some key indications on that cycle. And now we have exactly, I think, the situation that if we look in our list here, there is no cycle with a length of 72. Yeah, so now I can explain exactly the reason. Why is this a dominant cycle when it's not shown here up in this list? That's because we have a different setting. If we use full sample in range, and we need to update it again between 50 and 80, and then update it. Now it will be 51. So okay, wait. We need to. I need to set the range. Now it should. Where's the 51 cycle? There's the 51. Yeah, there's the 51. Now the second reason why it might not show here, I think we've seen it here in the list, 51. There it is. Why? There it is. Oh, sorry. I don't trust my own method here. So, but okay, so now you have exact match. So the cycle with the length of 51 is also shown here in the list, and it is shown in our range selection here. So now it's the same. But as I always recommend, keep the Cycle Explorer settings to dynamic in sample range, because this one should focus on the current market behavior. This is more important on forecasting. You also need to update this to look for the shorter term cycle. Oops, 80. So this is 72. Now you should be aware of why the cycle does not show up here in this list. Yeah, and you should not get confused about that. You know why the cycle with the length of 72 showed up, because it's using the current past, and it looks like this is exactly that in the overall data set. Yeah, you have the cycle with the length of 76 over the full data set, while if you just look at the current past data, this cycle has morphed into a cycle with a length of 72. Yeah, and this is what is shown here down below. So down below, you see the dominant cycle with a length of 72. And here you see the cycle with a length of 76 for the whole period of data. So, then you see, if you do the projection, there you see the different outcome of the dominant cycle here below, which indicates the low and the high here. And this is different than the static one here. And that explains the animation which I've shown you in the beginning. So the dominant cycle is more accurate in regards to the projection line because it's not using so much data. And the validation is done here. So it looks like this is a valid cycle because this cycle is active in the overall data set, while in the overall data set it has a lower Bartle score. But even in the current data set, and we can have a look at the configuration, yeah, the Bartle's limit is 49. So the Bartle score is above 50 just in the current time period. Oh my God, I hope that I don't irritate you with all the stuff I'm talking about here. But I want to get back to Hurst because this now gives you the indication if you want to work with the nominal model of Hurst. So you should use the cycle with a length of 72 days if you work with Hurst and you want to look for the 80 days nominal cycle, which has an average length of 68. And we now in the current situation at this point in time, this cycle has a length of 72 days. Yeah, and we also know the phase information, and that's why you can read here. So the cycle with a length of 72, if you use other tools then to do Hurst analysis or more complex charting analysis, you know from the phasing, so that the next low, yeah, with the Hurst nominal model, you align the lows into major points. So the next low is expected in 22 days in the future from today. So you can now calculate where the low need to be anchored if you use other charting tools to push the nominal model there. Yeah, and that's how you do it. So you would then also look for the next nominal cycle from Hurst, which is in the range of, I'm not an Hurst expert here, but it's the 20-week cycle, yeah, with an average length of 136 days. So therefore, I would choose a range of 80 to 170 days in this case. So let's switch to our browser again. Yep, here it is. So 80 to 170. So we adjust here the range setting, 80 to 170. Just update it, and here we have it. So the current nominal cycle from the Hurst model in the range of for the 20-week cycle. So the 20-week cycle has a current length of 116 days. Yeah, and the next low is expected in 70.3 days. So now you can anchor the low in the future. You can also plot this on the chart. 116 days is already plotted. And you see here from the longer term perspective, this cycle has an average length of 112 going over the full past. And now you can build a composite here. So from a composite perspective, you choose the 76 and the 112, which now you have a combined model from 2 Hurst cycles from his nominal model. Or you can have a look at each individual cycle here plotted down below, yeah, forecasting into the future. It looks different on other charting platforms. So they mainly use the low and then plot a dot or a small line and a dot into the future. It's just another way how to visualize here the tops and bottoms in the future and in the past. Yeah, talked a lot on this stuff here, but receive a lot of questions on why there is a difference in the dominant cycle and the static list, and I hope this explains you a little bit what the difference is, why this difference is important, yeah, in regards to the dynamic nature of cycles and how you can use it, yeah. So, for example, a lot of Hurst fans are out there, and you want to get what's the nominal cycle of the 80-day cycle from Hurst. Now you know how to use our cycle analyzer tools to detect the nominal cycle models here. That's the key topic. I think it's enough for today, and I think you need to replay it if you have not heard about this stuff, but this very important content here. And I will now look at your questions, so push them in, and if not, I will just have a look at it to give you some answers here. Yeah, 41. So if you go to our dashboard, you see, and I think we anyhow analyzed the cycle on the VIX index. If you go to the dashboard, you're right. And this looks like a cycle alignment, at least on the, 40-day cycle is a very short cycle. But you're right. So let's start with the sentiment here. So the VIX index, yeah, I think this is what we discussed anyhow. The cycle, the VIX index and the dominant cycle of 40, which is bottoming right now or in around mid-March. So these are the next two cycle lows from this 40-day cycle on the volatility index. And if you go into the current market, you see the exact same cycle, 41 days, exactly the opposite. Yeah. So this is oh no, they are not aligned. Yeah, top arrival. Yeah. Sorry. So exactly the opposite. This is what you would expect. So while the VIX index is a top, which means a market low, and you see in the market we have the bottom arrival from the phase here with the same length. So yes, you're right. This is a cycle's alignment between sentiment and daily data. You just need to be careful. The 40-day cycle is a very short cycle. So you also need to take into account the longer term cycles, which seem to top right now, as I showed you with the name exposure index. But yes, this is a very important takeaway that the same cycle length shows up in different data sets, which is a key finding from Dewey always. So if a current data set shows up on these cycles, that they are even more important to use them. Okay, the user group topic. Yes, just to give you an update on that, we are working on setting up the Cycles forum. Yeah, just short in time, where we can have really moderated, continuous discussion on this kind of stuff here. So my colleague Ray is already ramping up all the knowledge and the forum together with ourselves here, so that I would expect during the next 2 to 4 weeks, the community will also be able to discuss this content in a moderated forum afterwards. Yeah. Okay. Does the cycles match with Fibonacci? So Fibonacci, you could use them on a time. So Fibonacci time cycles, or Fibonacci on the price scale, price series. So what we are doing here has nothing to do with Fibonacci, but it's a good point on top to maybe check the alignment with Fibonacci cycles on the time, so time-based Fibonacci cycles and price-based, but that's not what we've done here. But I recommend that to do this on your own chart analysis, especially is Fibonacci projections on the time, so price projections done with Fibonacci levels get into alignment with cyclic timing signals. That's very powerful. So, and that at least where my experience is about. So cycles give us an indication only on timing. Yeah, never use cycles for price projections up or down, just for timing. But then if a price target is reached based on Fibonacci, on the point where cycles predict a time projection, then you have time and price coming into alignment, at least to the projection. So that's where I like Fibonacci. Okay. Yeah, so in the example, you found the Hurst nominal cycle, so which is defined and derived by Hurst in his analysis and these books. And then exactly, I used the range, the minimum and maximum to say, okay, I want our digital signal processing to detect the current cycle length, because Hurst always told there is no fixed nominal cycle with 80 days or 68. It's just the average of the cycle. So the dynamic cycle is then detected, it's 72 or 68. This is what I showed this, and the low is then also calibrated. It's not aligned to what you visually see on the chart. So this is in most Hurst models, but that's the simplified version. You just align it to a low in the past, but what you can see on the chart. Our digital signal processing recalibrates this based on the digital signal processing, because often what you see on the composite, so the price data, it might hide the real low of this cycle here, at least during the last past. So therefore, you're right, it is fine-tuned and calibrated here to use the digital signal processing to fine-tune and calibrate, and then to use this as an outcome to use in the Hurst nominal model if you do your projections with that. Yeah, the cycles identified by the cycle analyzer depend on what it's put in. So therefore, and I say this because if you upload your own data, there might be a different cycle identified. So the length here on the right-hand side in the table, it depends on the data set and the difference between the length between each data point here. So if you upload hourly data, the cycles will be hourly cycles. If you upload weekly data, then the cycle length will be weeks. If you use the predefined data sets, which I use here just in this demonstration, it's daily data and it's calendar days. It's trading days, because the weekends are skipped. Yeah, so it's not calendar days, it's trading days, because it skips the weekend here. And what you can do here in the settings panel, this is what I show here, you can fill in missing weekdays. So at least you have the complete trading days, just skipping the weekends here. So it's trading days, not full calendar days. Yeah, I think these are your main questions. Last but not least, there's one more thing. Yeah, one more thing. You know who told this? One more thing. We listen to your feedback. We listen and take your feedback serious, because in the past you requested to have this cycle model window even more large. And if you have watched closely, there's a new button available on the chart, which is here where my mouse is, right? If you toggle this button, it will now make you this chart much bigger. Yeah, so you can phase out all the detailed panels here and just concentrate on your cycle analysis. For example, if you have whatever selected a composite here and want then just from a visual perspective, you can just click this button here and then you have the full view on the analysis. First point taken. So that's why it's important I receive your feedback here in the section. Yeah, just a small thing, but even a small thing makes a big difference for some of you. Thanks for the feedback, and I agree this is an important feature. Oh my God, 50 minutes. I committed myself to 20 to 30 minutes. Now we are running again for almost 45 minutes. So please excuse for using the time. Thanks for staying with me for this period here. Even though if it was a longer session again, but I think this is now we're coming more into the important knowledge because static cycles are to be used with care. And today I wanted to make it a point on what you can do to improve the dynamic detection method. Thanks for joining me. I hope we will see again next week on Monday, 6 o'clock Central European Time. Match this to your local time, and I want to see you here live. By the way, don't forget to join us on Saturday, as we will have a special episode in the Cycles TV, and we will discuss the Cycles magazine with my colleagues Bill and Andy, and we will go through the magazine and join us discussing the current articles you will have in the magazine. So I will see you on Saturday, and we will see you again on Monday next week. Thanks for joining me. See you next week. Bye. Have a great day. you.